Hello everybody. Once again, we are joined on the channel by Cubicle 7, and Podrick and Dave are here to tell us about all the fantastic stuff they've been getting up to recently for Warhammer Fantasy Role-Play. So it's great to have you back with us once again, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having us.
So there's some massive news that we're going to sort of dive into in depth. And then there's a few other little bits and pieces, little gems and nuggets of warpstone that you can trickle out to us afterwards as well, I hear.
Yeah. Not too much at once.
No.
It is dangerous stuff.
It's dangerous stuff, yeah.
That is true, yeah.
It is. You start snuffing that and you just want more and more, and then where do you end up? Somewhere under Altdorf.
Yeah, it's not so much where you end up, but who you end up.
Oh, well,
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Very, very true. So we are mostly going to be talking about today the Imperial Zoo, which is a fantastical bestiary for Werthrop. So who wants to kick off with this and give us a rough idea of where this is going to lead us? Because it's a weighty tome and not your typical bestiary, I suppose.
No, well, I mean, I can talk about it for as long as you let me, basically. But the Imperial Zoo is our bestiary for Warhammer Fantasy Role-Play. It contains a bunch of exotic and unusual creatures from around the Empire and beyond. And yeah, it's not a standard bestiary. We really wanted to do something different with it. So you notice even the graphic design throughout the book is different than the standard line. And the whole thing is kind of being told through this first-person travelogue of a scribe who's part of an expedition that's been commissioned by the Imperial Zoo, hence the name, to go on 3 kind of distinct expeditions and write about what they find, basically going out into the wilds to document and maybe even capture some of these wild and exotic beasts. And throughout the expeditions, they get involved in sort of increasingly dangerous circumstances. Yeah, so we wanted, and the whole thing is delivered as a kind of a narrative with, like, mostly the only material that's really like out of character is the specific stat blocks about the creatures, and then an appendix that kind of gives some hints on how to run a similar campaign. We've got the full pre-gen characters for some of the characters who kind of go on the expeditions, and then some information on kind of like how to make money from hunting monsters in the old world and what you might do with dragon kidneys and skaven spleens and that sort of stuff. Some potions and equipment that you might, magical items you might make from that.
They're not just for eating.
No,
specifically not eating.
They're not just for grimace-nacked.
No.
It's all the stuff that you can try and hawk in the local market before the witch hunters find you. That's the main thing.
These do make good sausages, actually.
Yeah. There's a lot of bite to them, I'll give them that. But there's a variety of artists have contributed to this as well, because it's not one standard art style throughout, with a whole variety of artists coming together. Did you have to decide who was going to do what, or what about who was picking?
Well, this is one of our freelancers, Kirill, and we headhunted him after seeing some of his stuff on Facebook. So he's done the black and white pencil style art in this book.
Yeah, and then for some of the character art, we use our own Sam Manley, who people recognize. And then some of the art is archive art that was, you'll see a big list of artists in this. Some of the art was taken from Storm of Magic, which is where you'll see this one, I think it's from. And then some of it was also taken from Monstrous Arcanum. So there was a few things there that were like these beautiful pieces of art that possibly hadn't had the audience they deserved yet, that would feel quite fresh. And I think we're as good a take on some of these creatures as you're likely to get in any case, So yeah, there's a kind of variety there to illustrate. I think just about every creature in the book has an illustration, with a couple of exceptions.
So looking at one of the actual spreads then. So this is the sort of typical layout of what people can expect to see when they're reading through their own copy of it. And it is a beautiful breakdown of the creatures as stumbled upon, I suppose, in many respects. It's not a dry this is a dragon. Dragons live for 700 to 1 million years. They are 30 foot long. They have fire. They do that. It's not a dyed in the wool bestiary. You get a more prosaic approach to naming and shaming the various creatures in here, I suppose.
Sorry.
No, I'm just wondering, was it a deliberate choice to go for the more narrative drive?
That was essentially from the original vision. We knew that we wanted to do that and have it a bit be different, and with good reason. So, I mean, if you're looking at this, we've got the write up by our scribe Theodosius Schreiber, who's kind of thrust out of his comfort zone and into the wilds of the Empire and beyond. And it's his sort of take on what these creatures are like. So based on local folklore, mythology, and stories, and eyewitness reports, as it were, he's trying to distill some kind of sense out of that. And he doesn't always get it exactly right, but it doesn't. To me, the value of it is this is what people in the Warhammer world think about these creatures. Yeah. This is the experience they have of them. And the idea for that was it's meant to give you some plot ideas, because you hear about how these creatures act and what they might do and how they're experienced, and also to keep them like a little bit mysterious and a little bit kind of keeps them unknown about them. So you do have the in-world stat block, and we give a specific number for the weapon skill of a dragon, for example, but exactly how they might be encountered is a little bit different. And we're trying to, the idea was to try and bring over some of the flavor of the old world and the flavor, and the place these creatures kind of have in the minds of the people who live in it and have to kind of endure them, like what that's like. And then some of the little,
each of his companions, they obviously have their own perspective, and the art as well was, we were trying to sort of suggest that it was one of the artists with the group who was creating the pictures, so they're not necessarily accurate either. And they might present his growing disassociation from the world as a result of his terrible experience.
So that's one of the interesting things about sort of that you're saying about the way that it's kind of giving that in-world view of all these creatures and the travels around the Empire, because of like certain circumstances that surround the publishing of his first version of the journal that you get in the first opening paragraphs. I kind of like the idea that maybe as a group you travel around the world and maybe you find some burnt ends of a book and you're like, oh, this is some sections on this dragon or the raptors and all this kind of thing. And I love that it feeds into that narrative element of things and sort of sparks those interesting adventure ideas. It's really cool.
Yeah, we were pleased with the idea, and I mean we love it, and I've been a huge backer for this book since the idea was pitched. We're just like, yes, we're going to do this, and I really tried to just keep it as true to that original vision as possible. And so what we're looking at now is the 6 kind of core adventurers who set out on this, probably not all intending to be adventurers when they started, but ultimately becoming that, who set out on this journey. And the idea is to, after you finish the book as a GM, you might, and hopefully will, feel inspired to kind of go, well, this is a framework I could actually use for an adventure through the old world. So we give some ideas on hunting monsters and these beasts and how that might go. And you also have all of these as fully generated characters. So they're another great, mid-level pre-gen to just hand out to people and say, dive in, you've been commissioned by the zoo, let's go. Or act as like very detailed NPCs, if GMs would prefer to let players create their own characters.
Yeah. You say you were sort of like fully behind getting this out into the world. Were there any particular monsters within this tome that you are like, this is my favorite? I really liked coming up with this one and sort of adding it to the old world zeitgeist, as it were. So.
Well, there's a few in there. The dragon page that we just seen, I think, is a good example of what we tried to do, where you've got a kind of generic dragon, generic monster, and then you've got a specific creature, Caladir side of the fire, who's a slightly more dangerous or more lethal version of that. But if I had to pick one, it would be the giant, Halgrinson, the horrible from the cover. I love everything about that giant and his narrative.
I think I'll go for the massive hermit crab with the castle on its back.
Wow, okay, that's fantastic. But I'm a big fan of this, and this is a Victor Lisa cover, and I just think it's packed with character, and I love it unashamedly.
Yeah. One of the things you also pointed out as well is that it has all these kind of old world monsters and things in there, but there's stuff from, you know, the New World as well. You've got some fantastic, strange dinosaur-style creatures and everything there as well. Did you have fun sort of like stepping beyond the bounds and exploring that kind of thing as well? Sort of thing?
We got a real taste for it, actually.
Yeah.
So we'll have to talk
practice.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that later. But it was lovely because we delved down into Tilea a little bit as well in this book. And that was a lot of fun because it didn't get a huge amount of, you know, you had like a huge amount of focus in previous editions. Like Tilea's been there, and I mean, we'll talk about it more later, actually, possibly in this interview. But it was lovely to get there, and it was lovely to get out as far as, you know, maybe the Southlands or Lustria or whoever gathered those beasts you're talking about and brought them back, wherever they got them, basically. So yeah, that was nice, and it was nice to get out of, I should say, our comfort zone. But we've been in the Empire and in the Reichland specifically with the Emperor broadly since the beginning of 4th edition. So yeah, stretching the legs was great.
We are very comfortable in the Empire, despite the witch burnings and so on.
Yeah, that's true.
You've got to keep warm. Have you seen the price of oil?
Oh yeah,
that's true.
A good witch will do the job every time. When we're putting it together, having went through it, it reads very much like you could just read it like a first-person novel, essentially. If you just ignore the stat blocks there at the end, it gives a very good sort of primer for people to examine what the flora and fauna of the Empire is like. Was that a difficult thing to try and encapsulate in a bestiary? Because obviously the original bestiary, like 60 animals long in the core rules, and it's very, you know, here's an otter. Otters are small aquatic mammals that live by a river. They have no minuses for swimming. And you're going, and then you're looking at this now and you're going, okay, but what would that be actually viewed as in the old world? And having to come in and were there certain sort of touchstones that you were going to as reference, or was it all just a sort of a round table? Well, what would people think of Wyvern, and what would people think of these creatures that are denied to exist in the Empire, and their children's tales? You know, how did the sort of the through story come about?
Well, I mean, it was there from the inception. So a lot of that, most of that section of the book, I think practically all of it, that is that narrative, was written by T.S. Lukart, and he had written up, I think it was the Great Wolves section initially. We discussed what we wanted to do, and I knew I had to see it basically to know, is this going to work? And he'd written up the Great Wolves, and when I read it straight away, I was like, okay, this is exactly right, because it had this kind of like mythical sort of half told stories about great wolves and what they're like and what they do, and that like they're half supernatural, half natural from the point of view of people who have to live with them and deal with them. And when I read that, I just fell in love with it, basically. The idea that we would get this first person story, that it would be an enjoyable book to read. It's a very different bestiary. So there were times when we had to do a sanity check and we were like, you know, Podrick, are we going to do this? We could just cram a lot of monsters into a book and call it a day. And that's not what we wanted. It's different. It's a different, unique book, and I hope people really appreciate it as that different, unique thing.
Yeah, I think it's got that strong sort of subjective focus, but it is more about people's impressions of what it is like to live with these creatures than it is, as you say, listing as many different types of goblin as possible.
Like, I mean, some of these creatures, meeting them, it should be a life-changing event for somebody. Like, they're not, you know, boxes to be ticked off in a monster manual as you bang through an XP collecting sort of expedition through a few encounters. It's like, if you've met this thing, you're part of a few people in the world who haven't lived, and you know about it now, and you can't go back to your life and forget that thing exists and is out there. And obviously that affects some of the characters.
And you've probably lost a limb and gained several corruption points. And
you just, you know, angrier now with everything.
Life is tough when you're not the Emperor. But for me, because of that, because of the narrative story and the focus of telling it from an Imperial point of view, unlike pretty much every other bestiary for any other game I've looked at, where I would go, well, the GM needs to know that, I never need to know this. This, I would say, is almost required reading for people getting into playing as player characters as much as for GM, because with a fantasy world, you've got to be able to go, this is what it's like, this is what you know, and having not just it's very easy to do the geopolitical stuff. You're in the Empire, it's a bit like Germany. You're in Bretonia, it's a bit like France. That's relatively easy to get across. But then going, you're a peasant, you've never heard of X, or you've heard of these things, but you're pretty sure they're made up, or you live next door to this. Other people think this is a lie, but because of where you are, this is part and parcel of your day in, day out. You're going fishing every day, and you have to deal with these mealworms. It's a terrible travesty, but you've got to get the winkles off the barnacles, and
you just need enough trout to make it through the winter, to solve. Unfortunately, the mealworms disagree. Yes.
So because of that, and because it feels more like a book that is accessible and should be accessible for everyone, did that mean you ever consciously thought that this will be a good primer for player characters as well as for GMs, or was it just it makes a nice book, and the fact that it sort of opens avenues for everyone is just a happy coincidence?
Well, when you hear something and it's such a good idea that you want to claim that you had it all along.
Yes.
I've just had that. Yeah, required reading. No, I just seen it as a great book, as something that should exist and be good and be useful to GMs, but also have this in-world view. And sure, I'd imagine people start sharing a few pages, but actually, yes, there's several bits of it that will make a great primer, I think, to, or a great origin story for a peasant to encounter.
I suppose if you wanted a prop for a scholar character,
then the collector's edition would be an excellent. The collector's edition specifically would be excellent.
Get some post-its to stick over the profiles, and you're there.
Yeah.
One of the nice things you mentioned earlier as well was the appendix, which kind of fills up with kind of the things that you can use from these animals you've met in order to make strange and interesting potions and concoctions and all sorts of different things. Was it probably as much fun filling all that out with detail as it was working on the monsters and stuff, and trying to work out what you'd use different types of blood for and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, that was brilliant. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, very much so. And there was a point that there were somewhere where I think we mentioned, this isn't everything, and maybe there's a good use for Skaven livers, but no one's found it. But if we thought of a good use for Skaven livers, it would have been in there. I really enjoyed that part, and I do love spells and magic items generally, and trying to keep them fitting for Warhammer, which is much more interesting than some other fantasy settings where you can get away with a lot of stuff. Whereas with Warhammer, I think everything has a price, and you'll notice a lot of the potions and magic items and so on have some kind of drawback to them. Like it's not always. Like I think there's one in there that makes you very stealthy, but you can't speak, and stuff like that. I love those costs that you have to pay, because no power should ever really come to you totally freely. There's a cost to everything.
It's also, again, it grounds the game world beautifully, because in other games you kill a creature, it's got a level, you therefore get X XP and Y gold coins for no reason.
Yeah.
Whereas this goes, you're getting 50 gold coins, assuming you know how to preserve that Skaven liver and bring it back to be properly cured so that somebody can use it as nicotine replacement therapy. And if you don't, then you're not getting that money. And unlucky, I'm so sorry you've humped all that stinking stuff down through the mountains, but I'll give you 20 cents to go away now, please.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone brought a dead basilisk in last week.
Still haven't shifted it.
Really
Still there.
Yeah.
But that is a deliberate thing to try and be like, if you're prepared and you have you've got a commission for this creature, you know where to sell it. Maybe you've paid an alchemist for the right kind of preservation materials to actually get it and keep it and bring it back. Then there's a way to make money. But I've never, it wouldn't be fitting if you fight some bears in the woods and then you find a bag of gold and one of them eaten, which is being a bit facetious, but lots of creatures having a hoard of gold doesn't really make sense. To me anyway, in lots of settings. And dragons are an exception, I guess, but in fantasy.
It also stops the game from just ending at that point. It's encounter and scene. Whereas now you go encounter and you've got to get back. There's no 2 weeks later you've arrived back at the tavern where you got it. Your adventure continues organically then and has that flow where you're going out, then you're finishing the encounter, and then you're making your way back, and whatever happens in between there happens in between. And if the GM wants to speed things up, they can, and if they want to try and make your life a misery, it's Warhammer Fantasy Role-Play. Welcome to the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. And we've put that around, I think, every travel system we've done. It's been like, this is optional. If you want to just get there, you can get there. But sometimes the weird stuff on the road is the story. You know, that's the fun.
It's not the destination. It's the journey.
It's the journey. And how many digits do you lose along the way? You know,
they'll grow back, won't they? I rubbed some goblin toes on them.
Oh, that's funny. I mean, maybe. I mean, there might be something in there that's going to grow them back. Just, again, check Skaven livers for, but yeah.
We'll find a use for them eventually. So this Mighty Tome is coming out in 2 flavors, as always. We generally see the standard beautiful artwork that we've had to look up there, but there's also this beautiful piece of work. And you were saying this would make a good prop for a learned type, and I can see why.
I think it should be good. So, you know, it's full leather cover. The gold would be a gold foil. The kind of the pressed areas you see in there will be embossed into it. The spine is going to be rounded off rather than a solid, you know, flat, perfect bind or case bound rather. And with a few kind of like raised ridges, and then the edges of all the paper will be distressed. And the whole thing will be printed on not our usual glossy stock. It'll be on an uncoated kind of...
Oh, like a parchment.
So it's really like, how can I make this be as much of a kind of...
artifact.
Exactly, yeah, you know, which obviously is in keeping with the book.
Very nice.
You know, so that was the goal. And we really went all out and pushed our printer on this in so many ways. But I mean, I'm really looking forward to it. Obviously the Enemy Within collector's editions, we recently finished them, and you know, I love them, and this is a one-off thing. And I was like, okay, how can we push this one book just a little further than we have before? And I mean, I'm hoping we've hit it. So, look, you know,
it's certainly ticking all the boxes, except obviously the Skaven liver use one. But you know, we'll find out what that does in future.
I think to be like shipping issues with sending out livers, rat livers. Like I don't.
Just tell people to leave their fridge door open with the milk in it, and the liver will creep its way towards them anyway. That's what livers do.
Liver taking on a life of its own. I'm very concerned, but hence the name. Yeah. But so I mean, I think it's going to be a really good collector's edition. And I always say this, where it's like, look, you know, it's our job to sell things and take everything we say with a grain of salt and all that. But I really, really do think this is one worth getting. If you're into the book, you seem to be and you like it, you know, I think this is going to be one for the ages, hopefully, in terms of role-playing games.
Definitely. I mean, obviously, because you've got the option for people who played Warfare since the inception. This is a book that is like no other in the back catalogue, so people aren't going to be sitting with, oh, I've got that from first edition sitting on the shelf. You don't.
No, it's not an update to anything.
And because of that, it's one that anybody should be reaching for. And like I say, I think players should pick it up as well.
I mean, yes, definitely. Everybody, really.
Even people who don't play Warhammer Fantasy Role-Play should buy a copy.
Are there people who don't play Warhammer Fantasy Role-Play? Are they allowed?
I've heard rumors.
Well, it's shocking. I take it it's coming out in PDF first?
Yes, it's out now in PDF, and it's up for pre-order for the standard edition and for the collector's edition. And it'll be out then in print later on this year.
Stonking stuff, but that's not all.
No,
what else have you been tinkering away at?
Well, at time of recording, Up in Arms is due soon. So that's going to be our first definite player-focused book. So this is aimed at players of warriors, knights, and dogs of war. And it's sort of split into 2 halves. So there's a background and careers heavy first half, and a new and optional rules heavy second half. So the first half of the book is going to include a large chapter on what it is like to be an Imperial State Troop, with some options to specialize in using a handgun or a halberd or a, what else is there? There's the greatsword, of course, the greatsword. So yeah, if you want to swing a massive Zweihander around, and who wouldn't?
Who doesn't? Yeah.
And we've got a couple of non-warrior careers in there to support your army. So you're going to have some people who look after your baggage train, some camp followers, and people who draw maps for you, and people who know how to aim a cannon at things. So
I thought that wizards.
That was particularly funny when I read that in the sort of brief of this, and it was like, there are rules for cover and hiding, and then there are rules for blowing up cover. And yes. I was like, oh, that's
fun. There's a lot to be said for it. You mentioned Dogs of War.
I do.
At which point my heart starts beating like Thumper's foot.
Yes. Well, I'm sure you know there's a book of that title that came out in the late 90s, and we have gone through that and with a fine-tooth comb and lifted out a lot of stuff from it. So there will be 3 chapters that look into Dogs of War. There'll be one that's a very deep dive into the cult of Myrmidia. So Myrmidia has always been a bit like the third warrior god in the past, and here is a piece of art by JG, and that's the Temple of Myrmidia in Altdorf. But you can see some folk practicing outside, and they probably look like some of the guys on the front cover as well. So we'll get to them. But yes, Myrmidia, she's always been a bit like the third warrior god, and I never really felt that her aspect as a goddess of strategy was gone into before. It's sort of like heavy on the personal combat and honor, but now we've sort of added in a bit more of a Sun Tzu type vibe to her. So she's sort of a bit more tricksy and a bit more big picture than maybe Ulricans and your Sigmarites. So obviously she is very popular in the south of the old world. So Tilea and Astalia in particular. And we take a look at how her cult has got different aspects on each of those nations, or collection of city-states, however you want to think of them, really. And there's also a closer look at Tilea in particular. So we've got a big gazetteer of all the Tilean locations, so that if you want to take your trading game there, if you want to pop over the mountains after playing Death on the Reich and head around Tilea, you don't need to just be a follower of Myrmidia. You can also buy and sell olive oil and get to know all the different city-states. And then there is a Dogs of War chapter. So if you do want to go back to waving weapons around, there's the pikeman career, the siege specialist with the Pavis. And what was that? Oh, I keep on forgetting the third one. That's the light cavalryman. Yes.
Oh, right.
Light cavalryman.
And I think you'd have the rules for Tilean characters as well.
Yes. Tilean player characters too. Yeah.
Can I have a Galloper gun? It's all the goodness of a mercenary with a cannon and a horseman. It's great. I just do not surround people firing at them with light shot. Be fine.
Yeah, well, if you want to be creative with the light cavalryman rules and the artillery rules that we've also got in the book, then I'm sure
I will be.
Yeah, you got what you need.
Yeah, it sounds like an interesting blend, because when I first seen the cover, and you're just thinking, well, essentially it's just going to be expanded ways of generating military type characters, but it seems to encompass far more than that.
Well, definitely with the Tilea chapter, we've looking into the culture and the background, the lore of that realm, as it's been developed over a number of different novels and gaming products in the past from Games Workshop. We do have options for warriors as well. So there is an expanded armory that has a load of new weapons in it. So we've got duck's foot pistols have made a return, and a new sort of spread options for your blunderbusses. And then there's the artillery and structures chapter as well, which there's not a lot of call, hopefully, in most Warhammer games to resort to using cannons and catapults. But on those occasions when there's now the rules to support it. And definitely rules for hiding behind walls, as you say, Ben, and get rid of those walls as well, which is usually pretty bad for the people who are hiding behind.
It seems to me quite apt that there's all these lovely new black powder weapons to play around with in this book, because of all the monsters we just talked about in the Imperial Zoo that may require a big gun to take them down, sort of thing. So
yes, And then there's a couple of other things we're looking at. So there's a new and improved critical hit system that we're hoping adds a bit more strategy to choosing which location to aim for. Or if you're on the other side, if you're on the receiving end, do you want to buy a helmet? Yes, you definitely do want to buy a helmet now, because it's going to be a lot more painful to be hit in the head these days. And we've got rules for 4 different types of knights. So rather than just having the standard knight character from the core rulebook, we'll have separate careers for freelancer knights, Knights of the Blazing Sun, Knights of the White Wolf, and the Knights Panther as well.
Yay.
Some new information about how those different institutions work in the Empire and the Old World.
We're all off to Cathay for Crusade. Jump forward. So will this be a sort of a format that you'll explore more in future then as well? Because it seems like being able to sort of deep dive into a set of careers or a career archetype, if you will, with warrior, and then have sort of more detailed parts, but then also have additional chapters that sort of widen the worldview over time, could be a fascinating way to expand both the core mechanics of the game, but also
it could be. Yeah,
it's always a bit difficult to say what we'll look at in the future, but it's certainly been mooted.
Ooh, I'm all for that.
Yeah, like picking a couple of like classes, being the broader, which are each full of several careers, but picking a couple of classes and expanding on those is definitely what, probably the way we'd like to go. And I think for, with both of us, we'd struggle to put out a book without doing some kind of chapters of deep diving on some lore, basically. It has to be there, because the Warhammer world is so fascinating and you need to know where these things fit in. Like, I think with this one, we discussed, okay, we want to talk about mercenaries. And then after a couple of conversations, like, well, we can't not talk about Tilea now. We have to talk about that. And we can't talk about warriors without talking about Mermidia. And, we take a look at the lore on that. And as Dave said, expanding out that strategy aspect was really good. We also got new, I don't even mention, there's a warrior priest of Mermidia career specifically, and several new miracles of Mermidia as well that kind of build on that strategy aspect. So if you are going to get a lot of fights, a Mermidian priest is a great person to know.
Yes,
and have with you.
It also helps separate them out from just, Sigmar, who's got the biggest hammer, or Ulrich, who's got the biggest wolf pelt. Otherwise, their priests are very dull. Just push forward and slog things.
I think with Mermidia, it's like, dawn breaks and you're blinking into the sun and you can just see some figures launching an ambush at you from it, and that sort of thing. That would be the cunning tactics and so on is more what they're about.
Yeah.
Time to release the bats. It's fascinating stuff to hear what you've got in the works. There's a few other books that are also about to join the ranks on the shelves as well. So
reinforce your library shelves. There's more coming.
You mentioned Horned Rattus.
So the Horned Rat is should be, maybe at the time this is going out, will be in stores. That was obviously released a little while ago in PDF at the end of last year. So that will be out in print shortly. And as I said, might already be in stores. So with the Horned Rat, we also did the Horned Rat journals. So one for players, one for GMs, the Investigators Journal and the GMs Journal. And we're really happy with those. They're another thing that grew out of playtesting.
Yeah.
So with the Horned Rat, it's a real investigation and an awful lot of
series of investigations,
and an awful lot of interconnected clues. And I think we were playtesting at some point and someone said, like, my God, I need a journal to, that kind of a thing where they're like, I need a journal to track all this information and who's who and why we were there. Because, we can't just spoilers, etc. But investigating one thing leads you into and then down into, beneath the city to looking into other things and eventually, outside Midnight and beyond. But so that was the kind of idea for the GM or for the players, the Investigators Handbook. So when you get that, it's got like room for your character sheet, room for notes, tracking clues. There's also a mechanic in the Horned Rat where depending on what you do, you can kind of uncover more or less information about the existence of the Skaven, who are, broadly denied by Imperial society to exist, or certainly to exist anymore.
Hence why so little is known about how to make best use of their livers.
That is probably
it's
why.
a crying shame.
Yeah, and so you can kind of like track the general. Have we put out enough to, the people in power are starting to go, maybe the Skaven are real, folks. Should we be? Or alternatively, have you messed up so badly that people are like, nah, definitely just, these fraudsters are pushing the idea. So a little bit of that in there. And basically it's kind of broken into 32-page segments and then repeats. So with another character sheet and another, space for notes and all that kind of stuff. So you can use it for a few games, not just the Horned Rat, but I think it would really suit a play through the Horned Rat. And then the GM's journal is the flip side of that. So it's got like a lot of reference material in there. It's got some line spaces for notes, little encounter trackers for, tracking advantage and basic combat stats during combat. And then some squared paper for like quick maps and stuff. And I think that one, and they're both like nice little A5 case-bound books, black leather with a silver emboss. They're really lovely. And I really like the GM's one because it's Deliberations of the Council of 13. It's printed on the front, which is, I think is a nice little in-world ref to have on your shelf.
Yeah.
So those are cool. I like those a lot.
Though in reality, they were heavily divided over the scheme behind the Horned Rat, as the Horned Rat companion explains.
Yeah, well, I mean, the deliberations were extensive and mostly involved a lot of backstabbing.
Lord Verminkin himself, let alone the other members.
It's always the way when the clans start to get together, isn't it?
Yeah.
You get 13 people around a table to talk about a book, and then it just all goes horribly, horribly sideways.
Yeah.
It's not a good number for a committee.
It really isn't. No. Well, at least you're going to gain a consensus.
Yeah.
Several.
Not everybody will walk away from the table. And Empire and Runes is coming out in the summer as well.
Yeah, Empire Runes is out now for pre-order, and if you pre-order, you get the PDF of Empire Runes or the Empire Runes Companion. It is the endpoint for 4th edition's Enemy Within, and it will be in print in the summer. Yeah, we're working really hard to have that for. I actually don't know if I can say. But there's a convention on the summer we'd like to have it ready for, and we hope we can. Basically, so if the world could please calm down by about 2 notches, that would be great.
I think we're all on board with that.
Yeah, right.
If people want to bide their time until the Empire and Runes hits physical shelves, they can always pick up the Elector Counts, which is a fun little game as well, and just spend your time trying to destroy the Empire from within. But then you get to rule
Empire and Runes.
Yeah. But if you destroy from within and you win, you get to rule the ashes that are left behind, which is better terrain. And anyway, Electric Counts is our first, it was a Warhammer Fantasy role-playing card game, basically, set in the Warford world. And it's designed to be kind of, again, we can't get away from in-world ideas, but we just love the world so much. Yeah. It's designed to kind of mimic sort of pub game.
The sort of thing they play on the street 100 times.
Yeah, it's a terrific little game, very easy to pick up and very quick to play through as well. We've got on the channel that people can go and have a look at. Shay probably beating us again. I seem to remember. Shay tends to win everything these days. We're going to have to start hamstringing him.
We have our own internal person like that as well. Who we have to
terrible. All I need is a little supplemental deck. The von Karstein Elector Count. Let my 1,000 years of experience work for you.
Well, just let me take a note on that expansion. Yeah, I mean, we're really pleased with it. It's a nice kind of about 40 minutes a game. And I mean, you guys did your excellent video on it. That's probably what people should look at if they want to get a flavor for Electric Count.
It's nice to see that you're not resting on your laurels and just sticking to just the role-playing books, that you're sort of spreading your wings and adapting and bringing in other supplemental games that can be sort of played out. I love the idea that it is the sort of game that would be played in sort of taverns up and down the Reich, because it's interesting. Especially you could even throw it in the middle of a game. You and your friends get pulled in by some big bargeman to sit down. No, what you mean you're going? No, you're not going anywhere. Sit down and play. It'll only be a quick game, friendly game. Let's put a couple of coins on it.
I think it should be available in people's local Warhammer stores as well.
So we're pretty pleased with that. I was over at the Warhammer World's 25th anniversary last weekend, and it was amazing to see it there and for sale in Warhammer World. It was really nice for us.
As one of my friends said when we were playing it, he could imagine it being in the game world and someone in the tavern standing up and shouting, "I'm the Emperor!" and then everyone pelting him with
Nice.
signs and all sorts of things.
Stools, small halflings.
Yeah, that would be great. I highly encourage people to, play it in their games and bet their barge on it. That would be a good way to get into or out of being merchants.
Yes.
I'm 100% on board with that. Is there any other bits and pieces that people should be looking towards seeing emerge from you guys over the next months?
Well, in PDF, we're hoping after Up in Arms, the next book we've got planned is the Windsor Magic book. So that's our updated guide into the various traditions of magic in the old world. And again, that's going to feature a lot of new rules, lots of new spells, lots of new careers, a guide on telling the future, and a guide on reading the past.
You'll need Skaven livers for those, by the way.
More alchemy as well.
More alchemy again. So lots of new careers. So there'll be a separate career for each of the college wizards that kind of really deep focuses in on what they're like. Tons of new spells. I mean, it should be, and it's a big book as well. That one is quite large. We just ran away with exploring magic in the Empire, really. But if you didn't find anything in Up in Arms because you're not really into playing warriors, then you probably will have something in Windsor Magic. If nothing else, the rules for familiars are very good, which include player character familiars.
Yes.
Just being a familiar.
So if playing a halfling isn't challenge enough for you, you can try playing a walking book.
Yeah.
Wow.
So obviously a little bit different, but we just thought the idea was super fun. So, use with caution in your games.
Yes.
But, if you want to have, because I think there's plenty of very flavorsome things you could be, like creepy animals and so on, spying on people and using a little bit of your own magic, or being a sort of warrior familiar to back up a wizard. There would be a very different sort of experience, but I think a fun one.
Yeah. Great for one shots at cons. That would be
yeah.
And no one is going to be accusing us of power creep with the familiars rule.
Yeah.
No. Not a good con game could be being a bunch of familiars trying to rescue the wizards you serve or something.
Trying to survive.
Just trying to.
You've gone slightly damp. Oh, that's game over.
Somebody fetched a book binding glue. My spine comes apart every time I sit down. That would be terrible.
So Windsor Magic, I'm really personally looking forward to it. Yeah. It's a nice one.
And again, it's going to be loads of new great art from Sam and JG. We've shown off some of the art from Sam already online. And it's featured some of the famous wizards that we got in the book as NPC characters. So they included Elsbeth von Draken from the Tamacane book, and Engrim van Horstman, the
extremely
traitorous light patriarch who felt a zinch, and
very harsh.
Judgmental
over on that side. I'm just saying.
And then after that, it's going to be Salzenmund, which is our third city book. So this is the first time that a Warhammer Fantasy Role-Play product's been focusing in on a new city for
quite a while.
Yeah, for a good long while since he was right, I suppose.
Yeah,
but it's the capital of Nordland, and whilst it isn't quite on the coast itself, it has got a very seaside feel, and we feel invites people to the sea and to focus on the sea for the book we've got coming after the Salzman book, which is going to be Sea of Claws, which is going to be partly about the region itself, but mostly a source book for equipping a seagoing vessel and taking it around the world, and what sort of events and endeavors and careers
lands can be plundered.
Yeah, well, extensive rules for scurvy, maybe.
I've heard Skaven livers.
Skaven livers come back. Yeah.
Look, I've got barrels of this stuff. Barrels of it, and I need to get shot at somewhere.
Barrels of pickled Skaven liver for the trip across the seas to the New World.
Yeah, surprising amounts of vitamin C in a Skaven liver.
So it's funny you mentioned Ubersreich as well, because the Foundry module's getting an update for that?
Yeah, Uberstock Adventures 2 will be out on the Foundry quite soon, which we're excited about as well. The Foundry modules are they're very good. I really think that they are, top of the range in terms of what a VTT can do. Everything's nicely linked. The information's so well presented. The Foundry Warhammer Fantasy Role-Play module itself is really good and takes care of an awful lot of the maths and counting SL and calculating damage and the effects of things. It's a really great way to play, genuinely. And we've even heard from a few people who are using it they started using it online when they couldn't travel, and now that they can again, they're still like, well, bring it with you on a laptop, because it's just so handy for reference. So that's in there, the Uberstock Adventures 2, and we're going to be continuing supporting the line on there. So I think I don't want to say exactly the next one is. I think it's probably Archives in the Empire 2 will be out at some point, and continuing the Enemy Within as well.
Fantastic stuff. Well, there's a whole host of information for people there to go back and rewatch this several times and try and dissect everything you've heard and seen. A ton of fun coming for the old world from Cubicle 7 as always. It's been an absolute pleasure to sit down with you guys again, and hopefully we shall do so in the not too distant in reality, because that would be good.
That would be nice. Yeah, definitely.
So we look forward to you. If you've any questions about what you've heard, folks, drop them below and we'll pass them across and maybe even get you an answer or two. I imagine there's some stuff they won't be able to talk too much on. So you'll just have to glean what nuggets you can and extrapolate wildly on the uses of Skaven livers from there.
Yes.
All right.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.